Please sit down. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I want to officially start the meeting today. Welcome. Today is February 18, 2023. This is the Candidate Forum for the Los Angeles City Council District 6. I am Linda Gravani. I am the chair of the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, also, thank you, also known as VANC. VANC consists of all 34 neighborhood councils in the Valley, and actually 1/3 of the neighborhood councils are in the Valley. It is my honor to lead this important candidate forum, and there is always a team of people supporting an event such as this. So I want to thank a couple of people, if you don't mind. But before we do that, first of all, I want to thank the congregation of Osborne Neighborhood Church. They have graciously offered the beautiful facility for the good of the community. And I want to personally thank Pastor Ryan Donnelly, who will at this time like to give his own personal welcome and a short prayer.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you guys for being here today. As you heard, my name is Pastor Ryan. I have the awesome privilege of being the pastor of this church and hosting you guys here today. And I just want to say thank you to you for being here. As a neighborhood church, we care a lot about our community, and that is you. You're part of this community. And so I'm thankful that you want to be informed citizens to make a good decision. I know that not all of us can vote for all 7 of you. And I know there's more write-ins, all the candidates that are running. But I just want to say, as a pastor of this church and an involved member of this community, our heart is always to be partnering with people, whether we differ. I know all of us in this room have different stances on different political things. We all have different candidates we might vote for. But my heart is, as the pastor, is that we are here together because we all love this community. We love our city of Los Angeles. We want to see it bettered, and there's candidates here that believe they can do that, and so we're here to hear from them, to support them. And so I just want to open us up in a word of prayer, just asking for God's blessing, God's peace in this place, and that we would all have wisdom to listen to what they have to share. So would you join me in a word of prayer? Let's pray. God, I thank you for today. I thank you for an opportunity for us to be involved citizens, God, to be partnering with what you are doing in this city. You have a plan. This is the city of angels, God, and so we are asking for your blessing over this meeting. We're asking that you would bring wisdom and insight and truth and clarity, that you would help each one of these candidates to clearly articulate what's on their heart and their mind, of how they are going to make decisions to lead the city and CD6, God. And so I just pray that you would help encourage each one of them, give them strength, Lord God, give them just a clearness of mind. God, I pray for a peace over this whole meeting, God, that none of us would allow our anger or our frustrations, God, to get the best of us, but that we would be able to be cool, calm, and collective in what we want to say and what the questions we're asking. And so, God, I just ask for your blessing, for your goodness to be here. God, we thank you for your grace that abounds, God, and we just ask that you would be pleased with each one of our hearts as we are here to love on our nation and to thank you for what you're doing. God, before we even say amen, God, I thank you. I thank you for this great city of Los Angeles. I thank you for the state of California. God, we are blessed to be in this land. God, we are blessed in so many ways. And I know for me, when I listen to politics, when I listen to things, sometimes I get frustrated. But God, before I get frustrated, I just want to give you thanks. Thank you for this great city, God. Thank you for the men and women that have laid down their lives to lead us, God, to make attempts, God, to make things better. We are thankful for them, God. So I just give you praise and we give you glory. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Thank you again for being here today.
Thank you again. This event is being live streamed and being recorded by the talents of Daniel Northrup, a congregant of Osborne Neighborhood Church. He's up there in the back. Hi there. He's up there with Cindy Cleghorn, Valley Alliance of Neighbor Council board member, and she's also from Sunland Tahunga Neighborhood Council. A huge thank you to the entire Arleta Neighborhood Council. They were absolutely instrumental in setting up our location today, and we couldn't have done it without them, and a special thank you to Burton Hunter. With us today is Corinne Ho over here, who's going to be our timekeeper. She is from the Canoga Park Neighborhood Council. Also here is Ginny Hatfield from Valley Village Neighborhood Council, and also from Anna Measles, who is from Reseda. While this event is to assist the 7 neighborhood councils and the stakeholders within CD6, this is a Valley event, and the outcome will affect all the decisions made at City Hall. We thank the Valley for stepping forward. LAPD Mission Hill Station Senior Lead Officer Tracy Ware and other officers are here to assist the community as well. Our moderator is Dakota Smith over here. Dakota covers the City Hall for Los Angeles Times. She joined the newsroom in 2016 and previously covered City Hall for the Los Angeles Daily News. So I want to thank you also for your assistance today. And we should not forget the candidates. The candidates are here who want to represent us, the people of CD6. We appreciate your attendance and providing an opportunity to get to know you better. And Rose Gregorian, unfortunately, is not able to attend this morning, so she sends her sorry about that, but unfortunately, life happens. So this is how we're going to proceed. Dakota Smith is going to ask all the questions. She's the only one that has the questions. None of the candidates know what the questions are. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to introduce themselves, then Dakota will start with the questions. Each candidate will answer each question. The candidates are sitting in ballot order. That means when you get your ballot, you're going to see these folks in this particular order. Isaac Kim is the first on the ballot, so he will be the first seat. The next question will go to Imelda Padilla first, and then so on down the line. The answer will be 1 minute. Corinne over here has a sign that will let you know that you have 30 seconds left, and then the time, you'll see over there. And when your time is up, please stop. Anyone in the audience that has thought of a question, please make yourself known. You can raise your hand. There will be somebody that will have an index card for you with a pencil so you can ask a question. We do have a lot of questions already, but we may not get to it. So after the session, then we'll be going out into the patio and you can ask questions of the candidates yourself. At the end of the candidate questions, I will ask the 3 qualified write-in candidates to come on up and introduce themselves as well. And then they will have 1 minute to answer 3 questions. Again, each one will be first to answer the question. All the candidates will network with you in the patio. And also in the patio are representatives of the 7 neighborhood councils within CD6. The Valley is in the midst of holding neighborhood council elections themselves. Please stop by and meet your board members and learn about their election. And thank you, attendees, for joining us today, whether you're here in person, watching live stream, or recording. Again, it has been my pleasure to get this organized, and I do want to ask, I know you get exuberant and you want to cheer for your candidate. If you would just keep that to a minimum or not at all, it would be greatly appreciated. We'd like to hear from them rather than you at this moment in time, if you don't mind. Thank you again. I really, really, really appreciate your coming, and let's do it.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you guys for coming, and good morning. My name is Isaac Kim. I'm running for LA City Council, District 6. My wife and I love our neighbors, and we love calling CD6 home. I'm running because I find it very hard to believe that we can't do more to improve the quality of life for all of our neighbors in our district. Whether that's trimming our trees when they need to be trimmed or putting shade over our bus stop, we need to act now. So that our district doesn't fall further behind. I'm running to get the small things done right. Let's not just talk the talk, but let's really walk the walk and regain the trust of our community and use local government for the good of all people, all our neighbors who live in CD6 and LA. Thank you.
Good morning, Valley stakeholders. My name is Imelda Padilla, and I am excited to be here with all of you and excited to be here with all of a good amount of our senior lead officers from Mission Division. For those of you who don't know me, I am someone who also once upon a time sat on my regional neighborhood council of Sun Valley, and I'm excited to be here with all of you as a supporter of the neighborhood council system. As for those of you who don't know, I'm someone that has experience both working for the city, working for the county, some of Los Angeles' most well-respected nonprofits, and I actually started being involved with local governance when I was 15, and I was part of Mayor Han's Los Angeles Youth Council. So this is something that I am very passionate about, is local governance and taking an aggressive case management approach to making things happen. I have a record of that. For those of you in Sun Valley, that are from Sun Valley, you should know that it was I who finally cleaned up the Payless Foods burnt down grocery store because I was tired of seeing our neighborhood get neglected, and that's exactly the type of leadership that I plan to bring to District 6, is no excuses, let's deliver, let's make outcomes happen. Thank you so much for having me.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well this morning. My name is Marissa Alcaraz. I'm a single working mom, born and raised Valley girl. I've lived in the Valley for over 30 years. You know, my dad immigrated here from Mexico, met my mom, at Cisco's restaurant in the Valley. I don't know if any of you remember it. And she was a Valley girl. She lived here since her parents came here right after World War II in the 50s when it was dirt streets and citrus fields out here, and so long history being here. I love the 818, and that's why I'm running. I'm running to help this community, bring resources to this community, improve our streets and our parks and our schools. My parents raised me with public service and community at my heart, and helping people, and so that's why I've been working for the last 15 years on policies like raising minimum wage, helping people get their sick pay, hero pay during the pandemic, the guaranteed basic income program in Los Angeles. These are kind of things that I've dedicated my career to, and which I'm going to continue to work on. Also bringing public transportation and much needed housing to our area, economic development and resources, and cleaning up our streets and helping the homeless to move into housing. So I'm so glad to be with you here today, and I appreciate all of you, engaging in this civic process. It's beautiful to see. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Antoinette Scully, and I am a resident on the border of Van Nuys and Lake Balboa. I have 2 small children, and my background is in racial justice consulting with advocacy work in environmental and disability justice. That means that I spend a lot of time speaking and building infrastructure and programming around inclusive spaces, both in person and online. My priorities in this race are compassionate solutions to homelessness, expanding our transit and its accessibility, and just transition to removing things like pollution from our neighborhoods. I am excited to be in this race. As a community organizer, I have spent most of my time on the ground interfacing with our community members, and so this is my first public run for office. I know, but I wanted to give you a chance to learn more about me and my answers here, and I thank you so much for allowing me to speak today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Douglas Sierra. So I was born and raised in the Valley. I call Sun Valley home, where I have been living for the past 30 years. I'm a product of LAUSD schools. Proud to say I went to Polytechnic High School, go Parrots, and that's where I met my wife. And so together we are raising 3 beautiful children. And we purposely made the decision to raise our kids here in the Valley, just like our parents did when they came from El Salvador. But the reason I'm running is because the Valley's been changing. And I no longer feel that the Valley that I grew up, my kids are getting those same opportunities. And so that's why I decided to try to make a difference. City Hall needs change, and this is obvious, and this is why many of you are here. City Hall is not listening to the constituents' needs, and that's why I want to bring a light to that. I have 7 platforms, but 3 of the top ones are homelessness and housing affordability. Many of my classmates can no longer afford to live in Poly, and we see the exodus that's happening. I want to also invest in infrastructure and transportation, more speed bumps, especially near schools or where streets where people drive recklessly. And lastly, I want to bring jobs back to the Valley, make sure that people, entrepreneurs, have the resources to make companies here and make the Valley a destination, not just a place where people live. I thank all of you for coming.
Sorry, I'm a little tall. Hello, everyone. I think this is the closest I'll ever get to, leading a congregation. I don't know if I'll ever have this chance again. My name is Marco Santana. I'm one of the candidates, one of the 7 candidates, and not including the write-in folks that are going to be joining us, running for LA City Council's 6th district. I'm doing so because, like many of us here, this is my home. This is where I grew up, where I've dedicated my life. Some of you might remember me from my time working for Congressmember Tony Cardenas or State Senator Bob Hertzberg. I see a lot of familiar faces here. And for the last 5+ years, I've gone to tackle what I've thought is our biggest issue, and that's housing and homelessness. I serve as a director at LA Family Housing, leading a department there, supervising a team of 40, providing shelter to families and adults experiencing homelessness. And in addition to that, throughout my time here, I've chosen to further dedicate myself to this community by serving on the board of 2 nonprofits, the Mid-Valley YMCA, and Icon CDC, which is a small nonprofit focused on small business entrepreneurship. And even though, like you've all been engaged in your community, you've wanted better for it, you've tried to do better for it, we're here today because city government has failed us, right? We're here because it's not been responsive to our needs, it's not heard us. We talked about tree trimming and so on. We need leaders that will step up and do this, and I think that I'm a leader to do that, to bring this change here. I have an extensive experience in this district, working for the people, building coalitions, working with small businesses, and I want to put that experience to work for you all so that we have a city government that works for all of us. My parents came here from Mexico. They both emigrated with my 2 older siblings. I've lived and worked in this district my entire life, and I want folks, like Douglas said, I want my friends to be able to buy houses, to rent apartments and so on, and to just have a just life. So thank you for your time.
Thank you all. So we're going to start with Isaac, and we'll go back and forth. We'll switch it up a little bit so everyone can have a minute or so to think about what their answer is going to be. So these questions were submitted by the neighborhood councils directly from them. All right, here we go. All right, what is your stance on Whiteman Airport? Do you support closing it or keeping it open, and why?
I do come up here, right? So in terms of Whiteman Airport, it's very important that we keep that open, at least for our district. The reason being is that if that closes, all that traffic, including Santa Monica Airport, which is planned to close as well, which hopefully it doesn't, that traffic and that air traffic will come to Van Nuys, and you'll increase the already very busy airport. That's more noise pollution, that's more air pollution, and it's harder to mitigate and deal with that currently as it is, and if Whiteman Airport closes, we will have even more of a problem, even more traffic at Van Nuys Airport. So this is a very important issue.
Great question. So my stance currently with the airport is that I'm very, I want to know why it is that within the last year we have had 3 accidents at Whitman Airport. I want to make sure we know what we can do to improve the security there so that we can stop having so many accidents. However, this is where I am at. As someone that has been very active in, for example, Sun Valley, I never appreciated how the County of Los Angeles always neglected us as a community as it pertains to how we took up the building of Roy Shaw's Watershed Park. I have noticed that the county is not listening to the community, and I think the county needs to also recognize that it is not just the Pacoima community that needs to be at the table, but Whitman is for all of the valley. So I'm going to hold the county accountable to make sure that it listens to everyone in the East San Fernando Valley about what re-envisioning that airport could potentially look like. So I'm not for the closure, I'm for the community being heard.
Well, Imelda mentioned it. There's been 3 accidents at Whiteman in the last year, and we have to really look seriously at why that is. It's my understanding that the airport is not fully up to code in terms of the runway area and some of the amenities there. So I think that community, if that community feels that the airport needs to be closed, then that's something we should seriously consider. But Van Nuys is the airport in CD6, so my focus would be around that area as the representative for the Van Nuys Airport in terms of increasing the Quieter Nights program and changing some of the hours there to reduce the noise at Van Nuys Airport, transitioning to unleaded fuel at that airport, talking about adding solar and how we can clean up that airport, I think is going to be important for the CD6 community.
Yeah, I don't have any new information about why the planes are falling out of the air at the Whiteman Airport. So I would want it to close, and that's mostly because the people in that community have been asking for it to close. The youth, Pacoima Beautiful, there have been active protests for years now around the safety of Whiteman Airport, both at the airport in and of itself and in the neighborhood. When a plane crashes in a neighborhood near homes, that is one of the most unsafe ways to be in your community. And so for me, I do see that this would move airplanes and flights to Van Nuys, which I also think is heavily, has too many flights coming out of it. But I think it would be really important for us to continue to listen to the community who is asking for support around the airport that is dangerous. Thank you.
So I know Whiteman Airport is in CD7, but I grew up a block away from Whiteman Airport for like 3 years, so I understand the impact it has on the community. On the one side, I do see that it's good having that airport for emergencies, especially since we live in an earthquake-prone zone. Like, the decision has to be made when conjunctions of CD6, CD7, all the neighborhood councils. Like Isaac mentioned, if you close Whiteman, you have to expand Burbank, and so before a decision has to be made, everything has to be on the table. Don't know the answer right now. That's the honesty part, but what I do promise is that whatever decision has to be made has to be in conjunction of all the neighborhood councils that are going to be affected by this decision. Because as talking to constituents, I've seen the pros and cons, and so we need to speak out and we need to find the best solution, but together as a team.
As a civilian and as a personal member of this community, I've asked myself for the closure of Whiteman Airport and for it to be reimagined with what the community wants and empowering the community's voice to be heard as far as future plans for the airport. But I will say, as a council member, this is the adjoining district's airport, and so I would not overstep as a council member, but I would make sure that the community is being heard and empowered in what their decision ultimately wants to be.
Great. No, Mark, you could stay up there, actually, because I'm going to come back. All right. The issue of the LAPD staffing levels is obviously a hot-button topic. Right now, there's about 9,200 police officers. Mayor Karen Bass is trying to get to 9,700 police officers. Do you support increasing the number of officers, keeping it as it is now, 9,200, or decreasing the number of police officers, and why?
Thanks, Dakota. Yeah, I'm aware. I think we're understaffed by about 1,000 or so is the number that I recently heard. I think ultimately we have to make sure that we're adequately staffed is what I'll say. And I think that LAPD, and for the officers that are here, the senior officers, you could probably speak to this best, obviously. I think you've taken on a lot of inherent responsibilities that don't fall under you or shouldn't fall under you, right? I work as a director at a homeless nonprofit, like I mentioned. If someone's experiencing homelessness and you get a call because of this, there's nothing you could do. Being homeless itself is not a crime, right? So unless there's a public safety concern, yes, you could respond to that. I think we need to make sure that with that comes the fact that our police are adequately staffed to respond to police issues. But let's also make sure that we're staffing other programs like the Circle program, which is working in conjunction with you all, to make sure they're responding to those needs.
So from what I'm aware, we're at 9,200, and I believe that each year 300 or so gets lost through natural attrition. So like next year will be at 9,000 and lower. No, I definitely agree that we need to at least make up for the attrition. And I would be comfortable with raising the amount of police officers to like 9,500, which is like what we've had for the past 2 years. I do think public safety is very important. We need to have officers do their job. And one thing I will say, though, is that I want to take that opportunity of hiring more officers as a good thing, because we need to have more community policing, which in my book means that we need to have officers that grew up in that community, are part of that community, and know that community. So I'm excited of having DEI, or how we hire new officers, is something that I would like to make recommendation as somebody who's done that in the private sector in consulting. Thank you.
Did this get taller? It's tall guys moved it. Sorry. That threw me off for a second. It wasn't where it was last time. I believe that we should reduce the number of officers that we have on the street. I agree with Marco that police are taking on a lot more responsibilities that are not crimes, and I think that if we are spending money on solving crimes, then we should spend it more efficiently. I think that there are many ways that we could put more money into resources, as you talked about, homelessness, sanitation, all of these things that are departments that can help reduce what police officers are having to be called out for, I think would be much more efficient than hiring more police officers. Thank you.
Yes, I think we need to hire additional police officers. We, at one point, we're at 10,000 officers for the city, and now at 9,200, I mean, that's a significant decrease. So we need to hire more. We're losing people through attrition and people being recruited by other nearby cities away from LA, so we need to keep the officers we have trained and invested in here in the city. But we need to be smart about the budget as well when it comes to LAPD. So that means making sure we have the civilian hires as well, so that our sworn officers can be out doing their job, being on the street and patrolling. We need to invest in the alternative models, in Circle and in SMART. We need to increase our CSP program, our community safety partnerships. I've been part of a team that's helped to do a couple of those in other areas of the city. They've been really successful, and they help to bring, the community and LAPD together to keep our neighborhoods safe.
So I'm someone that would like to support what our mayor would like to do in terms of increasing the amount of police officers. But I think we also need to focus on getting the police officers that are already hired away from civilian positions and back onto the streets to focus on things related to violent crimes, human trafficking, intellectual crimes, and true crimes. I do think we need to get them away from responding to mental health crisis calls, things like noise complaints, parents calling because they need support with their kids being truant. There's a whole host of things that we got to get away from police so that they can focus on these important things. For example, I think it's incredibly inappropriate that last summer there was a rape at LA Family Housing and our police officers weren't allowed inside to actually investigate it. I think that's incredibly inappropriate. That's what they're meant to do, so we need to support them in being able to do their jobs.
Just like in so many things, whether it's in life or business, we need to constantly review things that are going on. What's working, what's not working. the fact of the matter is the police budget for the last 10 years has gone up every year except for one, and there hasn't been a statistically significant reduction in crime. With that said, I understand that there's a hiring problem, a recruitment problem for the LAPD, and that could be very much due to things like they are overworked, that they are responding to calls that they didn't think they would have to be doing when they signed up for the job. We have to review what's working, what's not working, and what's not working, we need to reinvest that budget into things like youth development and education, housing and homelessness to really solve more of the problems in our city than just putting a Band-Aid on it.
Okay, great. And if you want to stay up there. Obviously, we've seen a number of FBI agents at City Hall recently. There's been a string of investigations and scandals. Do you have any specific ideas of how that you would be more transparent to your constituents or put in more checks and balances?
Yes, so I have a 3-tiered platform because I intend to walk and chew gum at the same time. And my first part is to actually redefine the role, but also regain the trust of the community through transparency, accountability, and accessibility. That starts with something in this modern day and age as simple as a weekly virtual town hall after hours, where anyone in our district can come to me or join the Zoom call, whatever it is, and voice their opinions, their issues, feel like I'm accessible, that I'm a real person who hears their needs, and I'll be straight up with them. If it's some problem that I don't know much about, I'll tell them I don't know, but we will work on it. We'll look into it. We'll get somebody on it, and we're going to try to respond as fast as possible in order to regain the trust of our community in that way.
So I think one of the main things that I would like to do is I want to build more community power, which includes, building more trust and more transparency. One of the things that I created during the Raise the Wage campaign, I was the organizer who created a valley-based group of leaders that supported raising the minimum wage, and it was that community power that also convinced the 4 city council members of this region to support that. So I have experience building community power and building accessibility. So if granted this opportunity, I plan to build a committee of business leaders, a committee of LGBTQ folks, nonprofits, and families that can meet with me on a monthly or bi-monthly basis so that they can talk to me, I can talk to them, and we can be in consistent communication about what sort of things District 6 would like me to propel over to City Hall. Thank you.
It's unacceptable and disappointing the number of scandals we've seen happen in our local government over the past few years. Part of that, I think, is just the amount of power that the council offices have. So taking away some of that discretion sometimes, especially when it comes to things like building affordable housing and workforce housing, that might be a step in the right direction in terms of helping to balance things more. I'm going to lead with an open door policy, meeting with everyone, meeting with the community. I really feel that Van Nuys City Hall and the Civic Center there needs to be reopened, engaged, rethought of in new ways to really become more of a center for the Valley. I know so many people in the Valley who don't even realize that we have this asset for the community or that they're part of the city of LA because they feel removed from it. So I feel that having a community resource like that open will help to re-engage the people of the Valley.
I agree that sometimes these scandals I agree that most of the time these scandals are happening because of all of the power that City Council already has. Something like the redistricting or being able to get caught talking about the racist redistricting is an instance where the power is being hoarded and it should be separated, right? One of the ways that we could have less of this would be to enlarge the number of council seats, right? There are 15 districts, and we should have so many more spaces. The other part of that, too, is that these scandals are happening by people who've been in these political spaces for decades. And you need more people and new people who are not attached to these political scandals or to this, I don't know, family of corruption that continues to be elected into city council, so that you can start with new blood, because that's really what's going to be more transparent.
So transparency and accountability are two of my top values. It's very obvious that City Hall is not good. It's a modern day Tammany Hall. I want to bring more transparency. For example, as I mentioned, City Hall. Why can't one in a blue moon have city council meetings in Van Nuys and make the people drive to the valley? Because we, as you said, we hold 1/3 of the population. The California Assembly's Senate's voting on State Bill 52. I was very disappointed that the majority of the council members voted against that because they want to keep it in City Hall. I think the state or anybody else but City Council should have a say on the Districting Commission. And again, 15 seats is too few. It should be 25 or even more. And then lastly, one thing I want to mention, transparency, but like, City council members get paid $220,000 per year. In my opinion, that is a ridiculously amount of money, and it's not something we should be proud of. If expanding the council means every council member has to take a pay cut, I'm for it, and I'll be right there and calling it out. Thank you.
I think, as was highlighted by my colleagues, City Hall is rampant with corruption, and we know this to be the case. I want to start by saying thank you to the neighborhood councils, the Valley Alliance Neighborhood Council specifically as well, for pushing for an ethics reform last year and making sure that we updated our lobbying, making sure that lobbyists presented themselves as lobbyists when they came to meetings, when they came to neighborhood councils, and so on. So big shout out to you all, because you know that our city government is rampant with corruption, and we want to change that, right? There's a lot of things I think we can move to push. I think having things like a public advocate advocating for you all as constituents could be a start. Having an independent inspector general to make sure that city government is not, involved in these corruption scandals and so on. The Valley has been attacked, unfortunately, so many times by scandal after scandal, and so has just the city at large. We've talked about bringing government back to the communities. That's something that I've talked about extensively. We need to make sure that hard working class folks can go and make their voices heard in their communities instead of having to drive to City Hall.
Great. Now on to the issue of street vending. In some communities, there's complaints that street vendors drive out the local restaurants, that they block sidewalks, that they leave food on the streets. In other communities, these street vendors are welcomed. How would you handle the issue of street vending in the district?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of street vendors. This is a lot of hard working class folks that for them, this is not a part-time gig. This is how they bring food to their table. I think it does make sense when we look at things like, does it make sense to have a taco street vendor in front of a Mexican restaurant, right? Like that might not line up. But through the work I do at the nonprofit, I'm a board member of ICON CDC, we specifically have a program where we help street vendors navigate public bureaucracy through public health. We provide them a grant to be able to own a street vending cart as well. But I am in favor of this. These are folks' livelihoods. So are brick and mortar shops, but we need to find out how we can work in tandem instead of pinning them against each other.
So I'll say I'm very pro entrepreneurship and jobs. I have family that my uncles used to have a cart, so I understand their struggle. But I also see that there has been abuse. And let's just give you an example. Like certain street vendors have claimed spots. So if I were to buy a taco truck and park in where they're at, I would get harassed and bullied by the street vendors. And so I don't think that's fair either. If we're gonna have a street vending program, it needs to be fair for everyone. There needs to be permit. So for example, if I own a restaurant, the health inspector could come in and the meat has to be 130 degrees, but the same rules don't apply to street vendors. And from a safety issue, that's not right. If you're gonna buy from a street vendor, you should be very confident that the food is gonna be clean and it's gonna be safe. So having more transparency and accountability on how that process works is one of my goals. Thank you.
I know how difficult it is to turn something that's your passion into your livelihood. And so in that kind of way, I think that the street vending is a livelihood concern and a very important part of our city culture, right? It's very much a part of our city culture, whether it's the Valley here in CD6 or any other part of LA. And I think that for us to discount people simply because they haven't raised enough money to be in a building, because they haven't had enough experience to gather the right permits, I think that we should not discount people simply because they have found a way to move into entrepreneurship. And so for now, I am very supportive of the street vending process. Thank you.
Sidewalk vending to me is part of LA culture. It's part of, what engages in our community, and people like to buy from vendors. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't be on the street selling. I mean, they're micro entrepreneurs, just like a lot of other businesses. They go and they make things because the people want to buy from them. So I will tell you, I've been working with vendors for the last 10 years. I was the primary author of the sidewalk vending law in the city. And, I know the program's not perfect. A lot of it has to do with county and state and bringing everybody together to the table. SB 972 that just passed is helping us now to create carts that can go through public health, that can get permitted, and you're gonna start seeing those now. You're gonna see vendor carts that literally have health grades from the county that have been inspected and that you will then know are safe to eat and consume from. So I have hope for a vending program.
So I think it's a little ridiculous that we had to see social media elevate the dangers that street vendors go through as entrepreneurs, and then we were forced as a city to finally take this serious. So I think that the city of Los Angeles still needs to do a lot of work to perfect their permitting process. I don't see an entrepreneur wanting to spend $10,000 on a permit when the business itself only brings in about $25,000. So it's imperfect, and we have a lot of work to do. And my biggest grudge, I think, with this policy is that instead of telling vendors where they can vend, they were immediately told where they cannot vend. So what we need to do is really support them as entrepreneurs, and we also need to work with locations in the valley of where we can do it in a way where it doesn't intrude with our quality of life. Kaiser has a great vending program that I believe is there every other Thursday. We need to work with our malls. We need to work with places where they can be safe and continue to be entrepreneurs, but do not take over the sidewalks and do not intrude with our quality of life.
First of all, I love street food. I love buying from street vendors. I mean, where else are you going to get a dirty dog? But I'm also an entrepreneur. I know how hard it is to make a buck. These people aren't doing it just for the sake of doing it or just for fun. This is their livelihood, and I totally support them. It's also no secret, when you're going to a street vendor, you know exactly what you're getting into. It's not a restaurant, but these people are working very, very hard to make a living. And I would do anything to support street vendors in our city, especially since it's such a big part of our culture.
Okay, great. All right. After the racist remarks made by Nuri Martinez, how will you help to heal the community and rebuild trust, especially with the Black community?
Yes, this is huge, and this is a lot of the reason why many of us are up here. But let's really address it. I mean, those audio tapes, listening to it, that wasn't somebody who said those things for the first time. I mean, people knew how she talked, and no one said anything. It took somebody to record it secretly for all of us to know. Not only that, but I'm all about walking the walk, not so much talking the talk. And the words were terrible. They're unacceptable. But also, we got to remember the actions that they were doing. They were gerrymandering. We all know that that's not good for the people who live here. It's only good for selfish political gain. And again, I plan to lead by example. Already, our team is extremely diverse. I mean, talking about ages, race, all sorts of things. We're full of volunteers. as well as, again, reiterating that I'm all about transparency. You can come at me. I'm trying to do things as honestly as possible because I think that's the way to regain the trust of our community and just the right way to do things.
So I'm somebody who identifies or calls myself a community organizer. So as soon as these tapes were revealed, the first thing that I wanted to do with the community is validate our emotions. It was okay for us to be mad, sad, angry, and disappointed. And I think that that's a first step for all of us to say, this is not who we are, this is not who we're supposed to be. So what I would like to do is I would like to use spaces like this, like churches like this, to create town halls and have focus groups where we can have real discussions about difficult things related to race-based conversations. And I think we should include the Black community, right? And what was said on those tapes. We can also bring in the Asian community to talk about what they're going through after the pandemic, right? There is so much growth that we can do together because we are actually stronger in diversity. But first things first is we have to go through this mourning process of accepting and talking about how that was not cool, it was not who we are, and there's definitely opportunity for us to come together and start to heal.
Well, the pastor said it earlier, right? This is Los Angeles, the city of angels. And, you know, the tapes that came out, I don't think are reflective of the community at large and how people feel. And, you know, we just need to move past it, have healing discussions, have more community meetings with different groups, Black, Brown, Asian, LGBTQ. You know, I've been part of a team for the last 10 years working with one of our African-American electeds, and the office is made up of Black and Brown individuals, mostly Latinas, and really proud of that. And the community that's been built, you know, been working in South LA for a long time, helping to bring nonprofits together from all different sides. And I'm going to bring that same approach here to the Valley, helping to bring all the groups together and be united front in this work.
This was deeply painful to hear, to come out, to watch the national news talk about us in this way, and to remind us what many of us already knew, that our government, our local government, is not working for us, and it was working against us because they care so little about us. This was painful. And I'm sorry, but like, diversity teams aren't going to fix this, right? My team is diverse. Most of our teams are diverse. What's going to fix this is to have someone in office who knows racial justice work and is willing to move forward with everything they are going to do from a racial justice inclusive lens. That's what will fix this, because the problem is that we do not care about our constituents, and that's what we need to be doing. And so that's why I'm up here. Not just because this racist tape was leaked, but because as a racial justice educator, that's the world I live in.
So when I first heard the tapes, actually, it was like shock and outrage. And then later I was embarrassed because she was my councilwoman. And as a Latino, she was making Latinos look bad as well. It's the real. Yeah, we have to begin the healing. Unfortunately, there's still one of the council members that's still in that tape, still in City Hall. So I actually would call El Chacal and kick him out if I could. That would be my first thing. But yeah, we have to heal, but talk is cheap. We have to do more actionable. So I'm Latino, but one pledge I can say is my staff is not going to be 100% Latino. It's going to reflect the community that lives in the Valley. There's this Black, Filipino, Armenian, and all the different communities that make the CD6 proud. the city council has discretionary funding. So in my previous experience at UCLA when I was a student and at Deloitte where I was a consultant, I did a lot of diversity inclusion initiatives to bring more jobs for Black and brown folks. So I want to take that. Thank you.
You know, it was a really sad time across for all of us as constituents, as people identified in these tapes, right? And even for us as Latinos, right? As Douglas mentioned, we had the first Latina council president, our Latino president pro tem, and we had a Latino labor leader that were in those rooms, strong Latino leaders who failed us. And I refuse to call them leaders, but they were electeds in city government. One of the things that I think you can always look at what folks did when that moment occurred. You know, I serve as an officer for the two biggest Democratic clubs here in the San Fernando Valley, and in both we stood up, we put out statements before any elected officials did, before any other clubs did, and we not only condemned but asked for their resignations. I think government needs to be more transparent and actually listen to the people. And as mentioned, we had leaders who were out of touch, right? They need to stay humble throughout this time and make sure they're always here with you all, the community, listening to you, staying humble, and being inclusive throughout this time.
Okay, great. Nuri Martinez focused heavily on two topics when she first was elected: illegal dumping and sex trafficking. And some people really praised her for her work on those issues. How would you tackle those two issues?
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, I think she did some really great stuff with respect to sex trafficking, most definitely. And we see that now that there's been no leader in this council seat, it's starting to come back, unfortunately. If you, along this Poveda corridor, it's not as present along Poveda itself, but on Van Noen and other side streets across there, it is coming back, right? And so we need to make sure that the programming she did, she was the first elected we had that actually stood up and did something about this. And so we need to make sure that we continue to utilize that, continue to utilize the discretionary funds she had tagged into that, which I think was only throughout her time about $500,000. It wasn't even a whole lot, but it did such a great job in deterring sex trafficking and making sure that we're attacking the Johns and the pimps that are doing this. In addition to that, I think education as far as My 311, I'm sure all of you are educated in how to utilize it. We're probably 1% of the population that knows how to still utilize My 311 and how to connect with the city council offices. We need to make sure that we're expanding on that as well.
So yes, one of the few things I can give credit to the predecessor is, again, bringing light awareness to sex trafficking. Just as Marco said, you know, you can't victimize the victims. You gotta focus on the perpetrators, and we need to continue her work. And especially now that the 2028 Olympics are coming, you know, that's something that we can't lose focus on that. In terms of the illegal dumping, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, I was canvassing in North Hills, and there was literally a stop sign that's been torn down, and they're like, oh, how long has it been there? Oh, it's been there 2 weeks. And if this was Porter Ranch, how long would it take for that sign to be picked up? Probably 2 hours. So I want to bring equality and services in the Valley, because I'm tired of the CD6 always getting the short end of the stick, even though we are part of the same city. So yes, 311 is a great program, but we need to have accountable metrics. And I want the statistics to say, hey, when somebody calls 311, how long does it take for the trash to get picked up? And is Panorama City, Van Nuys different than other communities in the other valley? Thank you.
I agree with those who've spoken already that one of the things we could continue to do is fund the programming we know works. We know that the money that Nuri put into these programs worked and solved some of these problems. And so I, of course, would continue to fund those types of programs. I also think that these are the kinds of things where if you look at them as a long-term concern, instead of a 3-month here, 4-month here kind of thing, that's how you really know that you're putting in the effort to change the things that you need. I think that reallocating funding from places that are not necessarily doing the work to prevent these crimes would be another good way to do this, especially when it's coming to dumping. Homelessness is a big one, and sex trafficking. Thank you.
The sex and human trafficking program that was started in the Valley by the former council member is still going, and they expanded it into South LA as well, actually. So I think it's in the city budget, actually, so it will be an ongoing program, which is very necessary. I think we all agree that that's a problem in this city, and that's something that needs to be addressed. I know the member also had worked with a nonprofit to help to bring some of those people into housing. So that's something I would want to continue to fund. And when it comes to clean and green, this city has sanitation department, 20% vacancy rate. So we need to hire more people into sanitation. To me, it makes sense to use our clean and green programs where we work with groups like Conservation Corps to hire youth to clean up our neighborhoods. And we should have an automatic pipeline of employment for these youth who are in these clean and green programs directly into sanitation jobs.
So everything related to continuing to tackle on human trafficking is something that I plan to support. Lancashire, I think, is an example of where when we put the attention into it, we can reduce it. Lancashire and Sun Valley is much better than it was 5-10 years ago. However, some of you in here know that I was once upon a time a field deputy for the predecessor. I was the field deputy for Panorama City, and I did a lot of work related to cleaning up that community. So I actually believe that we need to be more aggressive to reduce illegal dumping, especially by construction companies who tend to just place it in the industrial corridors of Sun Valley, the alleys of Arleta, right, and in between housing in Panorama City. One thing, too, that I'm very proud of that I did in Panorama City in those 18 months that I was a field deputy was that I actually identified every single apartment manager within that very congested region where there's a ton of apartments, and I introduced them to each other, and I helped them create a neighborhood watch so that they can start to actually learn how to take on the bulky items, report things to housing, you name it. I'm about getting things done.
My wife and I live 2 blocks up from Sherman Way in Sepulveda, and I can tell you it's definitely a problem. If you go out early in the morning, we see it. It's right in front of us. It's a problem, but we also have to remember the victims of sex trafficking, and we need to prosecute the pimps that are going on. And if I can see it, if my wife can see it in the morning, we can do something about it, and we absolutely need to make this a priority. It's an issue with, we have a lot of families around us. In response to the illegal dumping, we need to make it a bigger punishment if someone is caught dumping. But also, a priority in my platform is responsive city services. So when those things are a detriment, when they are an obstacle or just a hindrance in our streets or wherever it might be dumped, we need to take care of that right away.
Okay, great. Here's a short question. If elected, will you use public transportation to get to LA City Council meetings?
If I wake up early enough, because it takes a long time. I took the bus the other day down Sherman Way. It took me almost 45 minutes to go a few blocks, and that's a lot to say about how much we need to do things for our district. The public transportation, simple things like I mentioned, shade over our bus stops. Bus lanes, we need that. They did it for Valley Village. They did it for other areas in LA. We can't be left behind. This is something super, super important. And yes, I would love if public transportation was easier, more accessible, more attractive, and can get us to places in a timely manner.
So I love public transportation. I wish I could use more of it. I grew up using the 152 to get around this side of town. I grew up riding the 94 to go up and down San Fernando Road. And during my second job when I was 18, when I worked downtown at a place called Property ID, I always took the red line to get there. And if I am granted this opportunity, I look forward to using the Metrolink station in Sun Valley to get to Union Station and get to City Hall. I like Metrolink, and I hope more of our public transit could be like Metrolink, because Metrolink provides Wi-Fi. Metrolink provides a place to charge your phone. So yes, I would be very excited if given the opportunity to utilize it more often, because it's right next to my house, and it's really very underutilized. Did everybody here know we have a stop at Sun Valley Metrolink? Raise your hand if you did. See what I mean?
Yes, I take public transportation. I took it for well over a decade to go from Valley to downtown area, whether that's going on the Orange Line to the Red Line or getting on, MetroLink at either the Antelope Valley area in the San Fernando station or the Van Nuys station, which is the Ventura County line. But, the trains don't run as often as they should, I think, in order to encourage people to take them. I know the Ventura one, the last train out of downtown is like at 6:45 at night, which for some people when they're working late, it just doesn't work. So I think they need to expand the train hours and offer more availability in order to help encourage people to use the public transportation system. I'm excited for, the new East Valley Rail line to come in and the Sepulveda line and high-speed rail. I think it's going to be transformative for public transit in the Valley.
As you're hearing our different responses, what you're understanding is that this is an equity issue. So where I moved to most recently was nearest to the Orange Line so that I could take the Orange Line to the Red Line to get downtown. And so for me, yes, it would be very easy for me to get to work from where I live, but that's because I chose a place that has high public transit. And I think what you're hearing is that many people would love to use public transit more often, but it is not nearly as accessible. It's right. It would be very early to get up. We all have 24 hours in the day, and if you are a parent, if you are taking care of loved ones, if you are traveling, if you have to stay at work late at night, those 24 hours are very different from person to person. And so I agree that the transit should be much more accessible. There should be way more trains. I love taking transit. It's almost like living close to anything else you like to do in another part of town. If you live 2 minutes from a bus stop and then 2 minutes from where your location is. But if you don't have that, then it is inaccessible to use as your ongoing mode of transportation.
So I live near the 224 bus line, and taking that Lancashire to the Red Line would be a breeze. But so I enjoy that. But let's bring the fact that the Valley, when it comes to public transportation, sucks, especially compared to LA. And so I'm tired of that. Every mass transit project, we only have 2 metro stops in the Valley, and LA has 50? So. But yet we are paying Measure M and Measure R money. So one thing I want to do in City Hall is fight for our money that we deserve. And I believe 6 to 10% of all metro fares, metro fares only compose 6 to 10% of all the revenue funding. So why not make the buses free for everyone? And that's how you encourage people to ride the bus. And again, one thing I promise is that the Valley is not going to be the stepchild anymore when it comes to public transportation.
I love it. Free ridership to encourage more riders. We actually saw during the pandemic that actually caused an uptick in ridership as well. So that was amazing. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, to answer the question quickly, yes, I would, and I have. I'm someone who, went a number of years without a car. I chose to go without a car. I had an electric car before Teslas came out. Used to drive a Ford Focus electric, 80 miles to the charge. So that was really rough. But throughout that time, I decided to just forego the vehicle and just take public transit. I have my TAP card with me at all times. I have a collection of them. I would definitely take it. I'm excited for the grade separations along the Orange Line, as I live next to the Orange Line, and I chose to live next to the Orange Line as well to make it easier for myself. But yes.
Great. If elected to the City Council, what would you do to support businesses in CD6?
Yeah, so, we've talked a little bit about street vending, right? And I consider that a form of business, a small business, most definitely. Through the organization ICON that I'm a part of, we've actually seen some great successes of having street vendors graduate to having brick and mortar shops. And I think we need to have pathways like this for folks. As I talked about, my parents both came from Mexico. And we were able to have good paying jobs because my dad was able to get a union job working in construction, and my mom got a job in a domestic services agency. That was their path. That's not the path for everyone. Some folks are going to decide to start a restaurant, to start a business, do whatever they'd like. So we need to encourage that. The city has amazing programming within the Jedi Zone. We've talked about the East Valley Light Rail. There's going to be a lot of walkability that we can encourage along the Van Nuys Boulevard to make sure that small businesses get localed more. I plan, one of the things I've dedicated to is having a small business deputy as well to make sure we have someone out in the community engaging with business owners and making sure they're being heard.
So as someone that went to business school, I'll just say that I'm very pro-business, especially small businesses. The Valley used to be home of the GM power plant and the Carnation plant, and when those jobs left, the jobs that replaced them were never the same. So I think it's very important not to lose those jobs, especially near headquarters. And also, let's be honest, the city is sometimes an opponent of businesses, and that's wrong. Let me give you an example. The recent Al Fresco program that helped a lot of businesses during the pandemic, they're taking it away. And I've had talked to businesses that spend $20,000 on their businesses and now the city's requiring more permits, another 10,000 in permits. That's ridiculous. I talked to owners, and it's I want to invest near Panorama City. The problem is that it's going to take me $15,000 to apply for the process, and even then I'm not guaranteed. So it's how can I invest in my community when the city government won't invest in me? So I promise to small business owners, I'm here for you. I understand how businesses are important, and you're the people that hire the people. Thank you.
I completely agree that the street vendors are a type of business and that business in the city is a relationship model kind of way. And so if we do more to build relationships, not only with the people in the communities, but with business owners, I think that's the first step to doing a lot of these things. The city tries to make a rule without the people who are involved, and then it feels like they are being beholden to a rule that they don't want to listen to. But I've also seen the city do a lot of work to support renters, to support Fair Work Week, to bring in the voices of people who are most marginalized in these instances. And I think that what we're not seeing is that we're not seeing more and more of that happen. And so as we make these decisions, whether it's for businesses, whether it's for renters, all of this needs to be in collaboration with the people who it's most effective. And I think that that's where it's the most prudent to start, because if you start making rules to say, I'll do this for businesses and I'll do this for renters and I'll do this for unhoused folks, we might be missing a bigger picture here. So it's always with relationships and collaboration.
The pandemic was really hard on our small business community. We lost a lot of small businesses, and they're not coming back. We worked to bring $120 million to LA in terms of small business grants during the pandemic, allocated that money, and hopefully keeping some of those businesses open. I worked to create a legacy business program in this city. It helps to keep our businesses who have been here for 20 plus years, stay here, stay in LA, stay local. There's a $20,000 grants that are given to those businesses. Worked to bring business source centers to this city, whose main goal is to help our small businesses to get them their loans, to get them their grants, to get them, the permits, and help navigate through the city bureaucracy. So that's some of the work I've done and needs to be expanded on to help keep our small businesses here, because they're part of our community. They're part of what makes LA great.
So one of the things that I would like to do is for those who are here and have been here, continue to thrive here. For example, a lot of our businesses that are here went through a very difficult process in order to be able to get their conditional use permits. As those conditional use permits expire, I hope that they can trust in me as someone that's going to help them, mitigate or upgrade what they need to upgrade to stay up to par, with regulations so that they can keep their conditional use permits. So I plan to be someone that is supportive in that way. I'm someone who spent the last 10 years mobilizing people to Metro meetings to make sure that we got our fair share with the Van Nuys Rail. So I'm going to pay a lot of attention to how we make sure that the Van Nuys Rail line is an asset and not something that displaces people, but that brings in better jobs. And I just want to be critical of the city. The city is not supportive of innovation. I already talked about my opinions on street vending. And whether you are a supporter or not a supporter of the cannabis industry, we can say that what they did to the cannabis industry is a big example of how LA just doesn't put the attention it needs to business development.
In order to help businesses in our district, a lot of that is very intertwined with making our district a more desirable place to live. And that includes things like public transportation, making it more accessible to live here, to commute to your other job. Ooh. It has a lot to do with beautifying our neighborhoods, planting more trees, making it just more desirable in general. But our district also, we all know, has a lot of industrial warehousing, industrial companies, jobs. And in this day and age, just like my business, Pilot Men's Grooming and Skincare, all you need is a warehouse and the internet. And a lot of things can happen. We need to attract more people like me and business owners who can operate their business even from their home and just keep their products in a warehouse or a fulfillment center, which we have plenty of here in the Valley. So we need to attract all sorts of businesses, but we need to also think about it holistically in terms of making our area someplace that everyone wants to live and do business in.
Okay, and this is a related question on businesses. And as Antoinette pointed out, the City Council recently voted to expand tenant protections. But what about mom and pop landlords? How do you plan to extend those protections to those landlords who count on rent to pay their mortgage or to cover their own living expenses?
Yes, thank you. And thank the City Council for expanding those tenant protections. They're absolutely necessary right now, especially as we're dealing with people experiencing homelessness. But with that said, there's a big difference between individual landlords and investors. So we need to protect the landlords who are mom and pop type of landlords and who rely on this extra income, who might have put a good chunk of their money into creating another property on their house, an ADU or whatever it might be. We need to protect those people as well because that's their livelihood as well. Sorry.
So first things first, I want to recognize that this is one of the most divisive conversations going on at City Hall right now, right? Because nobody wants to see more people go onto the streets, so we have to do something to protect tenants. However, this is a region where we have a lot of mom and pop apartments. And when I speak to those mom and pop multi-unit, owners, what they tell me is they think that this push to tell more folks to get legal counsel is something we need to continue to discuss, because if we just stick to that, what could potentially happen is mom and pops will settle when they go to court, as opposed to having to, be able to get the funds so that they can continue to own their properties. What I fear is that these mom and pop apartments will potentially be forced to sell their properties because they just can't continue with the payments. So we really need to do something to find a balance where we can protect tenants and we can also protect the small mom and pop apartments, because if they sell out to all these big developers, then we're gonna have a bigger problem. A lot of work to do to be in the middle.
So we all know there's an affordability crisis in the city. So when the council finally pushed forward just cause evictions, I was a huge supporter of that. But part of that rental package, I have to give a shout out to Councilmember Park. She put in a motion for the mom and pop landlords talking about how this negatively could impact them and how can the city help to keep our mom and pop landlords in place with financial assistance. So I think that's something the city seriously needs to take on. Sometimes, we have consequences that aren't unintended consequences to the policies we create because we don't talk to both sides, which is why I always say it's important to talk to both sides of people on the issue, because as Imelda said, when you put the burden on the mom and pop landlords, what can end up happening is rather than staying here and building intergenerational wealth and being good landlords, they have to sell to commercial companies, and that's not good for our community.
Many of these small mom and pop landlords have already sold to larger companies. And so sometimes when they're asking for more money or assistance, they're really giving them to these larger companies that own them. But I will say that, again, that this is a relationship concern. Nobody wants to see more people on the streets, whether that's unhoused people now, whether that's the mom and pop landlords who own their properties. These are all relationship questions and concerns. And I think that with the tenants' rights issues, the city has seen that that with the unaffordability of housing, we are going to be spending way more money on people who are unhoused. And this was one way in which they could make it so that this is a more efficient way to spend money in the city. And so I don't want to see more people unhoused. I don't want to see more people lose their homes due to being able to not get rent from their renters. But I think if there are more people in this conversation and more ways to collaborate, we'll find better solutions.
Yeah, I feel the pain for small landlords, especially the really small ones, the ones that own their house and they're renting their ADU to people. I mean, I spoke to a voter and a small landlord. He's like, hey, my tenant lives in the ADU. She hasn't paid rent in over a year, but she just leased a new Cadillac. I know she's not hurting for money. And unfortunately, that 1 or 2% that take advantage of this program are ruining for the majority of the people that really needed the help during the pandemic. So obviously, we need solutions that help homeowners too, that are now even afraid to rent their ADUs. So they need to know that, the city is listening to them. In terms of the best way to prevent homelessness from spreading is to prevent people to get kicked out. So I was in favor of the new rules that made it harder for landlords, especially those corporate landlords, to evict tenants because they want to replace them with and gentrify the communities. And so, yeah, it's a very complex problem that can't be solved in 1 minute, but I'm open to listening to all the solutions.
Thanks. Yes, we need to protect mom and pop landlords. The reality is that as they're going out of business and having to sell, not only are they selling to corporate owners, they're also selling to EB-5 visa holders. Those are folks that are out of country coming in and buying up their land, buying up their property. And so we need to make sure that not only do we incentivize local folks, but that we keep folks that are within our state, within our country, and so on. I think in addition to that, one of the things that I do at my job is I oversee our eviction prevention program. And so we have a very large program where we provide relief to both renters and landlords. And I've been able to develop these relationships with landlords who would literally just say, hey, Marco, I have this tenant that's not paid rent in a year. They're a good tenant. They're undocumented perhaps. They just haven't been able to keep up. Can you help? And so we utilize that funding to assist those folks there. And one of the things that we did in Council District 6 specifically is we passed Measure ULA. And Measure ULA has a pocket of funding in there that we can push to make sure that we further our eviction prevention money that we have across the city.
Okay, great. Here's a pretty a question that can be interpreted in many ways, but you just take a stab at it. How are you different than the other candidates?
I'm tall. I think one of the things is, you've heard, we all love the Valley, right? I think that's the beauty of the candidates that are up here is we all have extensive life and extensive experience here. One of the things that I can say that I've been fortunate enough is that I've continued to give back to not just the San Fernando Valley, but to, interestingly enough, Council District 6. Whether it's been the jobs that I've had over the last 12 plus years residing in Council District 6, or the nonprofits that I sit on residing in Council District 6. But my entire life has been dedicated to, again, not just the San Fernando Valley, but this district. And that's something that I think is unique. Again, we all love the Valley and this district, but my history shows that uniquely, I've continued to give back to the people here.
I think the biggest difference for me is that I am not a politician, and I have never worked for a politician, and I say that proudly. The city council gets the same type of people get elected, and you see the same types of results. So part of the reason I decided to run for city council is because I believe that we need a new voice that has no political experience. And I've worked in the nonprofit sector, but I've also worked in the corporate world and consulting, advising multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 companies. And I believe that combination of nonprofit experience with my corporate experience and consulting brings both worlds together. And and the last thing is, I'm gonna listen to y'all, especially the city councils, because you do a lot of the work day in and day out. And obviously, that's not how things are working. Thank you.
I'm not different because of the politicians. I've never run, so a couple of us have never run. I'm not different because I'm corporate free. A couple of us up here are corporate free. I think one of the biggest differences for me is that the work that I do is to bring inclusivity and care into every space that I'm in. And so that means not just from a racial justice lens, but from a disability justice lens or from an environmental justice lens. That means that the work that I do is to center the people who need it the most so that we all get what we need. I did that when I built the drop-in program in Studio City that got some of our unhoused folks off the street into interim shelter. I do that at work now, working with women across the country as we build programming to uplift women's issues. And I will continue to do that for y'all because this race is really about y'all. It's not about us. It's about bringing someone into this space for you so that we can work together and continue to get things done.
I would say experience is probably the biggest thing that separates us. I've been working for 15 years in public sector, whether that's working to lift people out of poverty, helping our working class families, raising the wage, doing hero pay, doing fair work week, creating guaranteed basic income program, but also on the other side, housing developments, bringing affordable workforce housing, PSH housing, these developments to communities, bringing in economic development, brought in like billions of dollars worth of economic development to areas I've worked in, which created jobs, which created new assets for the community, and that's what I can bring here into CD6.
So I too grew up with a disability. I have something called rickets. I actually have metal plates in my legs, and it's actually why I walk a little bone-legged. And it's because I was picked on as a kid that I have a passion for justice. So I think everybody on this stage has a great resume. But the difference with mine is that my resume consists of me being in the trenches to improve this community with you. Some of you know me as someone that did a lot of that community outreach to make sure that we weren't shortchanged on the Van Nuys corridor. I've been with you when we filed those community impact statements to tell City Hall what we do and do not want. From the very beginning that I launched this campaign, I've had a platform of 7 things that I want to focus on. I hope you check it out on my website at imeldapadilla.com. But I am also being very intentional about wanting to be intergovernmental in my decision making and intergenerational. Every decision that I plan to make, I'm going to think about youth and I'm going to think about the seniors and how they affect us now and later. And I'm very, very much outcome based. Let's get things done.
Mm-hmm.
I am very different from all the candidates up here, for better or worse. Unlike a lot of the candidates up here, I never planned to run. This is me stepping up and doing something that's actually taken more courage than I anticipated. I have not done anything in politics. This is my first time running. I haven't worked for anything in politics. I've worked for companies. I've started my own company, which I still run today. But again, I have no other motive other than to try to help as many people in our district and our city as possible. And I think that really, that I don't owe anyone anything. I haven't been in the political circles. And I've always been accountable in my work, whether that's for a company, private or large. And I've always been accountable, especially in my own business. And I don't see why it should be any different as council member. As council member, I would be accountable just to the people who live in our district and city. Thank you. I will get this right, yes.
Great. Well, we're all here today because of the neighborhood council system. But when you talk to members of neighborhood councils, they will complain about the burdensome regulations that they have to go through. They say that they face a lot of scrutiny when they try to submit expense reports, or that they have no protections. They could just be fired at any moment. What can you do, and what would you do as councilperson to improve the system of regulating the neighborhood councils, to give them more power and more respect?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, thank you, neighborhood councils. You are the front line and deserve to be prioritized. You know, I've been hearing a lot of really frustrating, a little funny things. I mean, even like trying to get donuts for this event. Takes a long process, a lot of planning, 6 months in advance, and budget approvals. I've heard this also from my own campaign manager who's volunteering for us, Lenira Murphy, who is also chair of Panorama City Neighborhood Council, as well as a former candidate in this race. I hear a lot of frustrations, which is very confusing to me because you are the front line, and we need to prioritize that. You're the ones who are most in touch with the people and our neighbors and our community, and I would do everything in my power to I guess, take down some of the red tape and the barriers, and create a better functioning and more efficient neighborhood council system.
So as I mentioned earlier, I've sat on a neighborhood council. I was there for a total of 4 years, and it's actually where I learned so much, and some of my favorite, most impactful mentors came from, like Mike O'Gara and Susan Bartlett and Cindy Sauer. I miss them all so much. But what I would do is, I actually know that the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment has a few desks at Van Nuys City Hall. I don't want just a few desks. I want a manager, and I want more staff in the valley so that we can continue to support the neighborhood councils. I think that we need to do more to help them better apply for the neighborhood purpose grants so that they can continue to help people that want to partner with the neighborhood councils. And I also think it's a little pathetic that for your community impact statements, you're only limited to, I believe, 1 to 5 sentences. We need to do more so that your community impact statements are taken more serious and that you're allowed to say more. So see me as someone that plans to grow you, support you. I appreciate all of the time and effort that you put into this work.
One of the main concerns I always hear from neighborhood councils is just difficulty in spending their money, that the city makes it hard to spend money and that it doesn't allow for neighborhood councils to roll over their funds from year to year and maybe do like a bigger project in the future. So I think that's something that can be easily addressed. Day one is just helping to make it easier for the councils to spend their money and also to come up with potentially bigger projects that they would want to fund for their area.
I think one way to support neighborhood councils might be to also expand the council district. It's really hard to get a hold of the district. It's really hard to make any kind of plans when everything is bottlenecked into one space, right? There are 7 neighborhood councils here today. That is a lot of people to be beholden to that goes through one funnel. And so I think part of it is just the hoarding of power. The city wants to be supportive, right? The city wants to help. It is not that they are here to keep you out of the loop and to make it more difficult for you. But when we have to make sure that there are rules for everyone to navigate through, those rules become kind of restrictive in the ways that they are set up. And so if there were more council districts in general, or more council people, then that bottleneck would be a little bit smaller and you'd be able to get a lot of the things done that you want to get done.
So I like to quote one of the lines from the movie Jerry Maguire, Show Me the Money. Each council member has a discretionary fund that's in the millions. I believe it's 3 to 5 million. Yeah, each city neighborhood council only has, I believe, like around 50,000. So in order for you to show progress, we have to narrow the gap. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have 15 city councils. We should have 91 neighborhood city councils that have the power that a city council has. Now, I know from 15 to 91 is a huge gap, but we have to get as close as we can. So if we get to 25, that would allow each neighborhood council to be split into 4, as opposed to right now that it's to 7. So but the most important thing is that the city council doesn't listen to the neighborhood councils. That's something I would change. Things are presented to the neighborhood council when things are already fait accompli. Things are already done. There is no say from the neighborhood council. It's just informing you. What I promise is that I will talk to city council members and involve you earlier in the process. And if I do something that you don't agree, I'll tell it to your face beforehand, not after. Thank you.
I think the least I could do as a leader and as your council member is actually show up to your meetings and listen to you. There's a lot of elected officials who don't even do the bare minimum of being present in your meetings where you're discussing very important topics. I know there's some communities, obviously Council District 6 has had a vacancy for a number of months, but there's some neighborhood councils that have not even had a representative even prior to that. Sun Valley being one of them, right? And so I think that that's bare minimum. In addition to that, let's call it what it is. Neighborhood councils are amazing, and they can be so much more amazing, but they were only established after the Valley tried to secede, right? The city of Los Angeles at that point was like, oh my God, we have to listen to our constituents, and we have to make sure that you have leaders that know this history, and are actually gonna empower you all, right? We all talked about bureaucracy, and that's true. We need to cut that bureaucracy down, but we need to make sure that we're actually listening to the people in our districts and expanding. Thank you for mentioning that. I was gonna mention as well, expanding the number of seats on the city council. I don't know what that number will be, but I think that more representative government will be better for you all as well.
And you brought up expanding the number of city councils, and that was a question, maybe a show of hands of who supports expanding the number of councils past the 15 that we have. So you all support expanding them, okay. Here's another quick question. Do you have the support of any unions in your campaign, and if so, which ones?
Yes, I forgot to mention, I also do have support of some folks within the neighborhood council system. Thank you to them, love them. And I do have support of Painters and Allied Trades. That's the union that gave my father the opportunity to have a good income job for him and his family, me. And so they are supporting my candidacy.
Okay, great. Yeah, union support, which ones?
So I don't have any at the moment. I'm trying to. It's kind of hard when you run and don't have political experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, same. I don't have any supportive unions, but what has been kind of nice for our campaign is that the unions have seen that some of us who are running that they're not familiar with still need a chance, and so a lot of them have backed out and are waiting until the runoff. So that doesn't mean that we won't have union support, it just means that they want to take a little bit more time because we're all going so fast.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen that. We've seen some groups say they're only going to endorse in the runoff, if there is one.
Yes, a lot of people are waiting after the primary. I have a few, the Southwest Region of Carpenters, as well as Local 661, which is our local carpenters union in the Valley, the Longshoremen out in the port, UFCW, which represents our grocery and retail workers.
Once upon a time, I had a lot of union support when I ran for school board, but in this round, I have the support so far of Liuna 300, and I did recently this week pick up a few endorsements like Councilmember Monica Rodriguez. We plan to really build out together from a very regional approach, and I also have the support of former LAUSD school board member Julie Korenstein, Dr. George McKenna, Scott Schmerlson, and Rosia Rivas. So what I plan to do in collaboration with them is an intergovernmental approach to improve our schools, improve the community, and work together. Thank you.
No, I currently do not have any union support as an outsider, but I would like to think that I was part of some of the reasons why they might have been withholding their endorsements, especially, going into these meetings as a small business owner. It's a little bit of a hostile territory, but I really conveyed that I'm all about people and the dignity of people. And so, yes, I mean, I do not have any current union support, but yes, I'm very much for it.
Okay. Now, here's another question we could just do a show of hands. How many of you support a city charter change that would create a truly independent redistricting commission? all of you. Okay, so we'll move on to that. Let's go on to homelessness, which is obviously such an important issue in the race. Do you have any ideas to do things to help the homeless that, we aren't seeing the city doing right now?
Yes. So obviously homelessness is a huge problem, but here's the ultimate end of the day solution is that we need to house more folks than go unhoused every day. And we need to start doing that consistently. Things we can do, maybe not exactly new, but yes, rent affordability, tenant protection. We need more mental health and drug rehabilitation services. We also need to turn a lot of abandoned buildings into either interim or public housing. I know the LA City Controller's Office has actually identified 26 buildings that were at least 20,000 square feet. I think it totals 1.7 million square feet of usable space that we can turn into public housing or interim housing, affordable housing. We need to attack this problem full on and keep the mayor accountable as well.
Okay, great.
So I believe that the approach to alleviating the unsheltered homeless community is by working together in coalition. Maybe 2 years ago, I reached out to District 6 and I said, why does San Fernando Road look the way that it looks? And I was very disappointed that they said, we don't have a relationship with MetroLink. How do you not have a relationship with MetroLink? As a council office, I believe that you should have all of the relationships with all government agencies to be able to take this on. So I also, more than anything, I'm ready to build, right? I'm ready to build the housing. I'm ready to have those difficult conversations. But what I need, and I plan to be holding LAHSA accountable for, is that they need to make sure that they can tell us how many people they've, specifically in District 6, have put into their CES coordinated system so that I can know how many of those homeless in Sun Valley and Arleta and Lake Balboa and Van Nuys are veterans, seniors, domestic violence victims, formerly incarcerated. Because once we know the specifics, not just the number, we can go after the funding, so we can go after the veteran home, funding to house our vets. It's about really knowing true numbers and true stories.
Well, we all know there's a homelessness crisis in the city. It's evident every time you step out onto the streets. People are losing their lives to this crisis. So when the mayor came in day one, declared an emergency for the city, I thought that was a great step in the right direction, treating it as an emergency the way it should be treated. And, I have hope, with the county now also declaring a state of emergency. You see the state and you see the federal government also coming in with new resources for our area. And, like Imelda just said, it's a regional problem. It's a regional issue. So that doesn't just mean the city, but it means the county coming on board. It means, Caltrans at the state and the federal government and looking at our different options to build more housing. One thing I would try and do is create a buy right program to build housing in the city. I think if a company comes in and they want to develop and it's going to have affordable or PSH or workforce housing, that we should allow them to do that without allowing council offices to interrupt and adding time and money to the project.
One thing that isn't being done enough to help our unhoused neighbors is that we don't have services for them. And so people can't actually get off of the street unless they have a place that they can get their mail from, a place that they can get an ID sent to, a place where they can actually get a shower, and that's not just like shelter. That is just the bare minimum services, CalFresh, mailing address. Those are the kind of things that you actually need to get off the street. And if you don't have anywhere to go to do that, you can't get services. That's just like the end of it. And so a thing that I have done is to help build those services through the council district and CD4 with the local nonprofits. And if the councils use some of their discretionary funding to set up these homelessness drop-in service areas, even in a church just like this, you could have 4 hours a day where people get services. They don't have to build a new building. They don't have to bring in new staff. You can do this mostly volunteering, where this is the first step to get people on their path to housing.
So from a practical standpoint, the best way to prevent homelessness is to prevent new people to become homelessness. We have ULA and HHH funds to combat homelessness. The problem is that the city is not very good at spending the money. I'm a consultant. I know how much they make. A lot of it is wasted on consultants, and that's not a good thing. The other thing is there's a Senate bill that's going to allow churches to build housing, limiting the permit processing. The church I attend owns an empty lot across the street, and they're having trouble building it. So those things need to be addressed. To follow Antoinette, they need mail addresses, and to follow Imelda, the state, the county, and the federal government need to team up together. The federal government actually has a lot of funding for homelessness, and the city wasn't able to apply for it because they missed deadlines. In my opinion, that's unacceptable, that because the city was too lazy to fill out applications, we missed on federal funds. So I would hold those people accountable to get the resources that our city needs.
I echo a lot of the things that were said. I just want to start by giving a shout out to our mayor for finally declaring homelessness what it is, a state of emergency. We dragged our feet too long for this. And I think that our city government that we have currently, again, not using the word leaders, but our city elected officials have shown this, right? I've talked in the past in my prior jobs before working at LA Family Housing, asking city council offices, hey, we have these vacant motels, we have these vacant buildings, why can't we turn those into interim shelter options? And the response I got was the zoning, the ordinances there won't be able to do so. Then the pandemic hit, and city government knew that they had to respond, and now we started to utilize vacant motels, vacant buildings. We're doing a lot of adaptive reuse with old buildings as well. I also think that the city needs to be held accountable itself. We politicize homelessness too much. We need to empower agencies like LAHSA to do better instead of pulling them apart, because that's really what our city and our county government has done. They just point the finger. So maybe looking at enacting a homeless czar, someone to make these decisions.
Okay, great. And on the issue of funding, do you support the reallocation of LAPD funds for mental health professionals to do outreach to the unhoused?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think LAPD staff need to be staffed adequately, and we need to make sure that we fund other services, and we need to look at our budgets, right? We have, I know our city budget for LAPD is about, I wrote this down earlier, 1.9 billion operating budget with 2.8 billion in discretionary funds that the city utilizes. It is a lot, right? And from those 2.8 billion in discretionary with the B, how much of that can go to other services like mental health and so on? Let's make sure we don't politicize this conversation. Let's try to find the appropriate funding to fund these operations and programs. But if at the end of the day it needs to come from this budget, then yeah, let's do it. Because, again, I don't think you all want to be responding to substance use or homeless calls, right? Let's make sure we have the trained professionals doing so.
So I'll start by saying, no, I don't believe we should cut funding for the LAPD, but I do think we need to audit the department and see where all those fundings are going. Let me just give you two examples at the Controlo signal out. The LAPD, I believe, has the largest city fleet of helicopters at 14, and they want to buy 2 helicopters that cost $20 million each. Now, instead of rubber stamping it, I want to know a good reason why LAPD needs more helicopters. Another one is they want to buy police dogs that cost $250,000 each. Again, if there is a good justification, I want to hear it, and it has to be the most prudent, and it has to be the more fiscally attainable. In terms of, this actually goes back to staffing. Because there's not enough police officers, a lot of police officers have to work extra overtime, even if they don't want to, and so that costs the city money, and that takes a toll on their officers as well. So we need to make sure that their funding is being allocated at the best way. And as somebody who has worked in corporate finance, has worked with million and billion dollar budgets, that's something that I want to tackle head on. Thank you.
Yes, I would reallocate funding from police to other services, especially mental health, homelessness, and other care services, because I don't think that policing is a care service. And so I don't think that personally that you need a gun to answer a mental health call. And so I would say that it's more efficient for us to spend money on people who can do mental health calls unarmed so that everyone is safe.
Yes, I would support investing in our alternative models of policing. You know, we've already invested in Circle, which is now in the Valley, and in SMART, and in the therapeutic van pools, which are run out of fire department. But I would also say that it's not the city's primary job. It's the county's job to deal with mental health. They're the ones that have all of the funding from the state, from the feds for healthcare. When we passed Measure H, it was actually the county's program. Triple H was the city's. So again, this is where it goes back to this being a regional issue. The county needs to step up on the mental health services component. And if they don't, I think the city needs to seriously consider creating our own public health department so that we can really address this issue head on.
So I have an uncle who is schizophrenic that we currently house in my house because he's had a very hard time finding the services. And in my experience talking with him, it's not the police that he has a problem with. It has been the difficulty of accessing the services from people that are supposed to serve him, like the county. I believe that there is other pots of money that we can go after for specifically mental health in partnership with the county. And like I said before, holding LAHSA accountable. I have never myself seen LAHSA in the community. The only time I ever have seen a bunch of LAHSA outreach workers together was actually when I was working on Roscoe and Van Nuys in that building, because it's a WeWork, and I was working from home, and I actually saw a bunch of outreach folks come and throw away a bunch of food that they weren't successful at passing out. That's the only time I've ever seen LAHSA in this community, believe it or not. So I think we need to do more to hold them accountable, because they're supposed to be the homeless czars, and they're not. So get the money from them.
Yes, I would review and reinvest part of the budget where it's not working. Currently, LA spends 1,400 times the amount on LAPD as they do on housing. And just certain things don't work. I mean, I don't think we should be buying a $300,000 robo-dog. For the police department. Even the NYPD, they rejected it after using it for a little bit. There are definitely low-hanging fruit where, you know, the budget's not really adding any value. And just like in anything, we have to create those efficiencies where we see them so that that money can actually go to alleviating a lot of the work that the LAPD does, alleviating a lot of the other stresses that our community and city sees. So yes, I would be very much in favor of reviewing and reinvesting part of the budget.
I don't know which one. Okay.
Sorry, just so you're aware, your mic is on, and sometimes it's hard to hear when the candidate's talking, it's distracting.
Well, we've talked a little bit about equity, and this is an issue that touches on that. Many of the communities in CD6, including Van Nuys, are rated as having a high need for more parks and green space. What are your plans to help address this problem?
Yes, so I grew up going to the Sepulveda Basin. I particularly, as a child, loved the remote control airplane field, the RC airplane field. I'm all about it. My wife and I love going camping. We love our green spaces. We actually go to the Sepulveda Basin with our dog almost, I would say, every other week. And I would preserve and create actually more green spaces, make the current ones that we do have even better. We need to reinvest and save those spaces. They're just so fragile. They're rare. They're only going to become more rare as the population grows. And so we need to cherish those spaces. I mean, they're good for our community. They're good for our children. There's no reason why we should just get rid of them or sacrifice them for any other reason.
So my family and I have dedicated ourselves to increasing park space here in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. Some of you guys know that I am related to the executive director of Pacoima Beautiful, and my sister is a pro at applying for the grants that can help us increase more open space in the region. She was Pacoima Beautiful, for those of you who don't know, is the second organization that actually was granted the cap and trade dollars. The first amount went to South Los Angeles, and my sister brought it here to the San Fernando Valley, and we're gonna build more parks. But I also think that we need to enhance and clean up the parks that already exist. I look forward to building more pocket parks. I think they're great. I actually played a role in bringing the one that is in District 7 on Fox and Laurel Canyon. I love the one that we have at Mason Park over there in Panorama City, North Hills. But we need to do more to take care of the ones that already exist. I think it is so sad what has happened to Sheldon Skate Park. It's a park that is in the middle of Sun Valley, Pacoima, Arleta, and Panorama City, and it looks like a dump of trash. I'm gonna go clean that up.
So green space is so important to neighborhoods, to families. You know, just as a mom, I take my daughter to the park all the time, and you know, she loves to play on the playgrounds, especially over in Lake Balboa area, and feed the swans and do all that fun stuff. So it's a passion of mine. You know, I've helped bring in $60 million in park improvements to areas I've worked in, brought 3 new parks by helping to acquire properties and create these new spaces, but also just reimagining some of our streets. You know, I helped create a green alley network. Basically, we reimagined the alleys, and we put in cool pavement and drought-tolerant plants and stormwater capture and murals, and basically created this network where people can go from the parks and the schools and other places of interest and use these green alley spaces. And I'd love to bring something like that here to CD6.
I'm so glad that Marissa brought that up. Actually, those are the kinds of reimaginings that I love thinking about. And I think it really is just reallocating funding so that the parks that we have are usable, correct? And that means, I think, taking down some of the fences so that people can have easier access into them. And I think that also that means that when we reallocate funding, we can do these little sidewalk parks and, what did you call them, pocket parks, which is adorable, right? There's a lot of empty land, there's fenced in, unusable land, and I think that reallocating funding so that we can buy these little small properties, and that even means like community gardens and places where people can see greenery, because it's not just going out to a really big park for green space, right? It's having that green space come to you and be in your neighborhood and your community in a way that is beautiful and gorgeous.
So for everyone that lives in the district, it's obvious that besides the Sepulveda Basin, there's not a lot of green space in our community. So my daughter plays at Brantford Park, which is here in Arleta. And yeah, the parks are a very important part of our family. So I want to keep that, especially when it comes to park and youth games and the services that they do in the community. But I also want to expand that. And I'll speak this from the school side. All of the schools in the Valley and LAUSD and CD6 are just hardtops. My daughter goes to Vina Elementary here. They can't play from August to November because it's too hot. So one idea that has been talked about that I'm a big proponent is, why don't the city help fund LAUSD in creating new green space so that on the weekends and on the summer, those can be community parks for the people. And so I'm a very advocate of having green space, especially here in the Valley, where if you come here in August, you know how hot it gets. Thank you.
Our parks are precious, right? They played such an amazing part during the height of the pandemic when everyone was at home. We really had no space to go, so we would go to our parks, right? We would go to places like Sheldon Skate Park or Petaluma Park in Lake Balboa, and the youth really had a place to kind of get together and not be closed off at home every single day. So we need to make sure that we're not just taking care and building new parks, but investing in the parks that we have now. There's a lot of parks that are truly unusable, and just due to, thank you. Can I take 10 seconds back? Just kidding. And due to the blight that has kind of happened there, and not specific to homelessness, but also just, gang involvement in those areas. I think one of the things that we all talk about is we all want to build responsibly along this district. And in addition to that, how can we add on things like the Quimby fee, which allow the city of Los Angeles to take money from the development so that we can further invest in parks that we have currently and also generate new green space?
Okay, great. And this is going to be the last question, and thank you all for taking part in this. This is a question about pedestrian and bicycle safety. As you know, the city's really done a pretty miserable job at lowering traffic deaths, particularly of pedestrians and bicyclists. And I know that you guys have talked about this at previous debates, that the valley should be a great place for bicyclists because it's so flat. So what are your plans for improving pedestrian and bicycle safety?
So we just talked about parks. One of the things that I want to highlight is Sepulveda Basin has this awesome bike path along it. Let's make sure that we work with the river and create this waterway infrastructure so that we have bike path across the entire district, the entire San Fernando Valley, and truly the entire city of Los Angeles where possible. I think that's a start. We need to make sure that we have protected bike lanes along those routes as well to make sure that bicyclists are not being killed, right? I myself had been hit by a car while riding my bicycle, and the person driving the motor vehicle was like, hey man, watch out, right? And I was going through a driveway on the sidewalk, yet it was my fault. So we need to make sure that we're taking care of folks. We need to make sure that we make our districts, our streets more walkable. We talked about business improvements, and that's one of the ways you can beautify communities and attract not just more small businesses, but attract people again to visit those districts. We need narrower streets. How can we look at Van Nuys Boulevard and we have the East Valley Light Rail coming. How can we make sure that we're taking care of that? How can we make sure that, again, with the narrower streets we create, we have less street racing as well? And that's my time.
So again, for graduate school, I had the opportunity to live in the Bay Area. So I was living in the city of Berkeley. Let me tell you how different it is. Very bike friendly. Actually, during my 2 years of grad school, I rode my bike there. And it was a shame that when I came back to the Valley, I also had a few close calls with people. I couldn't ride my bike anymore, which is something I still miss. So to quote Marco, protected bike lanes are a must, especially near the East Valley corridors, because that also will encourage more people to ride it. And then when it comes to streets, people drive crazy. There's a lot of little streets, especially near schools, that don't have speed bumps. So I would definitely focus on making sure that our kids feel safe walking to school, and installing every school should have speed bumps near its perimeter. And lastly, I want to, the car shows are getting too crazy. I mean, it's like, some cities have done where at each intersection you put some of those barriers to discourage that. So I'm an advocate that every big crosswalk has one of those. Thank you.
The city has sort of started this work, but they've kind of dropped the ball on it, right? They already have a city mobility plan with the works of all of the places where we can add bike lanes and protected bike lanes and improve our sidewalks and things. And so part of the reason why it doesn't happen is that the city council person doesn't say, yes, please, I want to do that. And so the first step really for me is just being able to say, yes, I would love to add this protected bike lane when we repave this road. You can follow the CD6 district on Twitter, and they'll show you like, ooh, today we repaved this road, White Oak, I think it was, and added a protected bike lane. And the other piece to that is, as a person who does ride bikes in the city, it is super dangerous. Our district has, I think, like the top 10, or so, like 10 of our streets, our intersections are some of the most dangerous. Sepulveda and Sherman Way is one of the top ones where pedestrians are hit. And so something as simple as diagonal crosses or scramble crosswalks where all of the pedestrians and everyone moves at the same time and then traffic goes is another way to improve our pedestrian life.
We unfortunately did have a record number of pedestrian cyclist deaths last year, so we know how important this is and that the city really needs to invest. As Antoinette mentioned, we have a mobility plan, we have Vision Zero projects, but you don't really see them happening in Council District 6. In Council District 6, we only have one Vision Zero project, and it's to go along Roscoe with the new bus rapid line that's going there. And so we need to increase these projects. We're going to bring this new East Valley rail line to the district, but that doesn't have a Vision Zero plan accompanied with it yet. So one of the first things I would do is tell the department, hey, we're getting this new transportation. You got to build out the Vision Zero. You got to make sure the pedestrians and the cyclists are safe near this project. You got to have first and last mile connectivity, and we know where our high energy networks are. So we need to do those plans for these areas to ensure pedestrian and cyclist safety and make sure the roads are safe for everybody.
So one of the things that our previous mayor was very good at is creating a lot of plans, right? A lot of plans and a lot of plans, but there wasn't a city council that actually had the backbone and the desire to make things happen. I am somebody that would like to make sure that in District 6 we do take on the mobility plan and things related to the bikeability goals and increasing our walkability goals for District 6. We've learned so much from the areas that have created protected bike lanes. For example, on Van Nuys Boulevard between the 5 freeway up to San Fernando Road, not only are more people using their bikes, but all of the businesses, once upon a time, that part of Van Nuys Boulevard had a 2-year, every 2 years there would be new businesses because people couldn't see the businesses because they were driving so fast. So I would like to utilize the Van Nuys train that's going to be built as our opportunity to make sure that we also increase bikeability, walkability, as well as all of the perpendicular strict streets to make sure that they are also enhanced. So much to do, ready to make it happen.
Yes, we definitely need to create way more bike lanes. This is super important. I mean, we need to make, public transportation, other than along the Orange Line, where can you feel really safe biking in our district? Very, very few places. I live right next to Valerio Elementary, and we need things like traffic calming. I mean, people, I would say it's a joke that the stop sign is almost like a joke, but it's not funny. People blast through it. This is a safety issue. We need more traffic calming measures. And I know we're not Netherlands or anywhere, but we have so much data that we know where the dangerous spots are in the district. We know how we can slow cars down. We need to implement these now. I mean, again, we had the record number of deaths in our district last year. This is something that can only get worse, and we need to address this immediately.
Okay, great. And I thought we were done, but there's been a request to ask this last question, so I'll ask it. What will you do for the Black community? And did you put out a statement calling out the former council member, Martinez? Sorry. This was the last question. What will you do for the Black community? And did you put out a press statement calling out the former CD6 member?
So when this whole tape dropped, I was just a normal resident of CD6, just like you. I wasn't putting out press statements or anything, but I am here right now. This is me stepping up again because of things like this, because of racist comments. I'm running so that I can better the lives of the people, of all people, doesn't matter who. But this is something, again, that's totally unacceptable. To say it again, I don't think our council member or our former council member, that wasn't the first time she said it. If it was me in the room, I don't care who it was, I don't care if it's the president, I would have said something right then and there. We need to address it head on. We can't live in a society like this. Too many people bring too much value to go overlooked or to be hated on.
I did put out a statement. I put it out on my Instagram, specifically talking about how this is something that should not be existing in leadership. We expect more from our leaders. As a Latina, I started to say, we need more education so that we could stop talking like this, and 2, it needs to start at home. So I've been very vocal about how this type of behavior, this type of language doesn't belong in leadership. What have I done for the Black community? I've always worked together with the Black community. For example, just recently, when Karen Bass did a press release on San Fernando High School, I was actually asked, Imelda, we need your help to mobilize people to this press conference. I was the one that said, let's not forget the Black community. So it was I who brought over Nicole Chase from the Boys and Girls Club in Pacoima to make sure that we had the presence of the Black community at that press conference. In addition to that, when I was at the county, one of the biggest things that I advocated for was to make sure that SPA 2, which is the San Fernando Valley and the Santa Clarita Valley, did not lose their money to address mother and infant mortality rates within the Black community. So I am somebody that plans to work in partnership and build more coalitions.
Well, I would work with the African American leaders of our city and the groups here. You know, I'm really honored to have been endorsed by Councilmember Coram Price and Councilmember Heather Hutt and Assemblymember Mike Gibson and Senator Steve Bradford, who are all leaders in that community, and Robert Wynn, who's a leader here in the Valley in the community. And so, you know, I would work with them as I have for the last decade, you know, building those relationships, you know, between the Black and the brown community, and helping to unify and be a voice for that.
My statement was to run for office. As a racial justice educator, as a person who was really hurt by this tape, as a Black woman who's probably at the bottom of every totem pole that you could be a part of, it was really discouraging that this was even able to come out, but it wasn't surprising. And the work that I do for the Black community now, whether it's local or national, right? I started a literary service that uplifts the voices of Black people. I volunteer with Valley of Change, which is run by a wonderful Black organizer, centering Black people who've been killed by the police, right? I hosted a community safety event centering people and community safety. So it's not going to be difficult for me to work with other Black people. I'm not going to say the Black community, I'm part of the Black community. It's not going to be difficult to work with other Black leaders in our spaces, because that's the work that I already get to do.
So, not a politician, so when the statements came out, I was, I did say on my Instagram stories that the three sinvergüenzas need to step down. But yeah, it's very hard decision. I do say that I have worked with the Black community. I'm part of MLT, Management Leaders for Tomorrow, which is an organization that has Black and brown students that go to top business schools. So I'm very proud that I mentor students there, people that want to go to business school. I'm a mentor to them. So was I at UCLA when I worked with Black and brown students that were trying to transfer to UCLA. I was a mentor of the NPI site, which are to advocate for community college students. So thank you.
I know I touched on it earlier, but as a leader in the Democratic Party, for both the Democratic Party of the San Fernando Valley and the San Fernando Valley Young Democrats, we made sure as soon as we heard these comments that were out, we made sure that we stepped up and that we put out a statement, not just condemning the words, but asking for resignations, because you can't just do one or the other. You have to do both. You have to condemn and ask for resignations. And this was done prior to even elected officials doing so, right? Folks were still kind of wondering, what do we do? You know, Nuri's a friend, Nuri's a this, and sure, but even as a friend, this is when you call it out the most, right? You can't be in these spaces like these leaders were and just letting this happen. So yes, I've done a statement through those capacities. As a board member of the YMCA, we worked internally on a statement. As a leader at LA Family Housing, within my department, I made sure that the staff I supervised felt welcomed and put out a statement to my department as well. And some of the things I've done is, through my work at LA Family Housing, I've worked to break down barriers as far as making sure staff are being paid equitably. We had a lot of,
Okay, great.
And with that, here I am. We're not quite done yet. The 6 people up on the platform are the qualified candidates for CD6, and we appreciate all of you for the rapid-fire questions that we sent your way. But you can leave the stage now if you would like. And we would like to bring up the 3 write-in candidates. Now, these people are qualified, but they didn't get qualified soon enough to make it onto the ballot. So if you 3 would come on up, would it be better if we brought the microphone down for you? You're okay coming up? Okay, thank you, everybody. So we have 3 candidates here who, as I mentioned, will not be on the ballot. You would have to do a write-in. Write-in candidates will be accepted by the city clerk until March 21. So there's a sign out in the front that will show you where you can find any additional write-in candidates. Now, Dakota is going to allow these write-in candidates to speak for 2 minutes. We okay? Speak for 2 minutes and tell us about themselves, and then they will be each asked a question. There will be 3 questions, and each will answer, and then we'll go network outside. Thank you.
So do you want to each introduce yourself and stand up?
Can we make it a microphone?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Carmelina Minasova. You see, I was in a uniform, come from the work. So we're in a crisis. I'm 50 years old, and I saw all the time my life in a crisis. 2 years ago, when the pandemic started, I was going to work, and most of them need to be home and take care of the patient. That's called COVID-19. I'm not going to come safe, but never got COVID. That's good things. But meantime, I understand the city in a crisis because we have another COVID called bureaucracy, corruption, spending money. For this district, the politician to run 230,000, 20,000 per month. Can you believe it that? How much? But senior citizens is getting less. Police officer getting 100,000 only year. Anyway, we spending some money not properly. My second job is human rights. 30 years I spent internationally, spent in the military also, as a medical doctor, respiratory therapist here. So we got some kind of problems. And I don't see candidates, I believe best luck to them, but I don't see the solutions. And that's why I'm coming for protect human rights, hate crime against African American. That's the criminal. We need to criminalize those. It's not only Nune Martinez talking. We see in the street people talking people each other. That's all day happening. We need to woke up. That's why I always here come to help the community, because we need to change the policies. Like look at elections, 19 people candidate, James Thomas here too, only they allow to 7. What is priority? They accept 1 day for them, but 12 candidates out. Democracy, it's not what the law say. Democracy is a public residents wants. We want to save, we want a better management. That's why I'm here, step out to help. And thank you, police officer. I work with them in LAPD Van Nuys division. We need to change the policy. Policemen's doing their job, but unfortunately, DA not prosecute criminals. That's why we have.
Great, thank you.
Hi, thank you, and thank you, Valley Alliance. I am Wendy Thumb, and I just threw out all my prepared remarks after listening to all of this. I've been president of the Sun Valley Area Neighborhood Council the last year, and I have been serving happily, proudly. It has been my privilege to serve since 2014. I have been chairman of beautification, and so many of those cleanups that you have seen, I'm going to use I pronoun right now. I have organized, but I think we've heard enough of the pronoun I for a while. When you join a neighborhood council, it's no longer about I, it's about we. It's about we as a group working together. I'm just going to give a shout out to my vice president, our vice president, excuse me, Norma Chavez, who does so much for this community. You have no idea how much she does. She is the one who strong-armed me into running for president. We had sadly lost Mike O'Gara, we had lost Cindy Sauer, both of whom I learned so much from, and I had big shoes to fill. What you don't know is that Cindy Sauer and I spoke almost every morning. We texted, I have emails, I have the literature to prove this. We talked about every day, and we were opposite sides of the political spectrum, but we talked every day, what can we do for Sun Valley? What can we do for Sun Valley? The human trafficking that was taken up, she started. The cleanup, where we won the Monster Award, was, I drafted the blueprint for that. We won the Monster Award, cleaning up 5 metric tons of debris in Sun Valley. I came from a cleanup this morning. I did drive, but I do happen to have my TAP card with me. I love public transit. I look forward to serving you, listening to you. It's been a great privilege to listen to you. Thank you so much.
Sorry, saw everyone now. I was ducking down to get to the microphone. My name is Richard Serrano. Started my service with the city of Los Angeles in 1983 as a student worker at Ritchie Valley Swimming Pool. Back then it was called Paxton Pool. I was a junior lifeguard, locker room attendant. I'm still with the city at the Department of Water and Power and got hurt 6 years ago. Last year they told me I was going to be in a wheelchair, so that's my mobility there. But I said, don't bring me the wheelchair. I'm going to overcome that. I'm going to walk again. Mr. Serrano, you got to be realistic. I am. You did your part. God did his part. Now it's my turn. Thank you. But with that being said, all the things that were being spoken, all the questions, I've been to the city council meeting. I did talk to De Leon to get off there just on Friday. So it's a crazy feeling to know that everything that was spoken about I already did. 2017, I went in front of the city council to get a supervisor that was on probation to become a supervisor. He made a comment to me, don't forget, Monday we got it off. When I was back, came back to the city and I was under him, he said, it's Martin Luther King Day. That's the only good thing, and excuse the word, a nigger's ever done good is die so I can have a day off. So I went in front of city council and reported it. We did minimal, but I got to them in 15 minutes what I couldn't do in 5 years. I've been in front of them when they wanted to go ahead and say, the pandemic's over. I told Kokorian that he had to exclude himself because he had a vested interest because he has units that he rents. So he did. And now we extended it to March 31st. Those people that took advantage of it, yeah, I feel bad for the homeowners, the small mom and pop. But there's a plan to it. I've already been a sanitation worker, paved these streets, worked with the infrastructure. I know those pipes are going to burst. We're changing them now on Foothill. We just finished there. We're on Arleta now. That trunk system, brand new. We're going to have to do it for the infrastructure. I'm doing it now. I ain't waiting for it to be elected. I'm already doing the work. Thank you.
Great. So I've been asked to ask all of you 3 questions, and it'll be the same format as before, where you can all answer the question. Van Nuys Boulevard, I was there this week, and it was very dismal to see that Van Nuys City Hall is still closed. And if you walk around that area, you see a lot of graffiti, and you see a lot of closed storefronts. There's a light rail that will be coming down Van Nuys Boulevard. But besides that, what is your plan to improve and revitalize the boulevard?
The plan is simple. We have to bring back to community love, thinking, because every human has 2 things, logic and feeling. If the criminal people doing graffiti, we need to understand why they're doing this, because they want to join the gangs or whatever. Those things happen. We cannot control the people, what they do, but we can educate the people first. Second, we need the control by police. More police officers need to be in a Van Nuys street. We need to help and support other organizations what's supposed to be need to teach them and help them. Why we in a crisis? We always having those problems, homelessness, criminals, because we're in a crisis. If we're in a crisis, we need to act as a crisis solutions. All available solutions we have, but we're not acting. We're only thinking spending money, and a politician only raise their salary. That's all. That's what we see. That's why the people doing this. We need to get control.
So I think it's very important to remember that every program that is implemented has to pass through council, has to be implemented with the help of business, the community, the LAPD has to be involved, the various social groups have to be involved. So I, as part of my neighborhood council, have been able to pass programs that I think will be helpful to the community. One that I have recently proposed through my combined homelessness and beautification committee, we started discussions just this week, is bringing a light to be shown on the problems such as Van Nuys and the community by having filmmakers come. I happen to come from a film background, and I've worked with a number of very prominent filmmakers, and I am going to ask them to commit to bringing filmmaking to that particular area as well as our area, and bring that revenue to help solve the problems. Thank you.
Van Nuys Boulevard, know it well. I lost my father there. Right next to the public library, there was a bar. My father worked for the Department of Water and Power, and he went there to shoot pool with his friends. Never made it home that day. Yeah, does it change hand to hand? That bar isn't there no more. Do we need traffic again? Yeah, but everyone's ordering online. So you can't get people to pay for a brick and mortar location when you're doing everything online. So if you're not going to support your community and do the shopping in the area or get it to go, it's not going to happen. It's not going to change. You're just going to put a bike lane that nobody drives down. 2 bikes in a month, 2 bikes in a day. The traffic that gets congested there, not sure where to park. Yeah, I drive down there. I know the area. I know it from Valley Circle to Sylmar all the way to Downey. There's not a street I haven't serviced in the city of Los Angeles. But you got to put the bike lanes where they belong, where everyone goes. Today's community, new generation, you put the bikes in the back of the truck and go to the park. You don't even pedal them. Or I used to pedal to Venice Beach from here from Pacoima. Sorry, it's a new generation.
Well, Richard, you want to stay up there? Because you can answer this question, new question. There's been a lot of attention on the LAPD in this election. There hasn't been as much attention on the LAFD. And some news reports have stated that there's no paramedics at some LAFD stations. We see this, we see response times go up. What would you do to help correct this and bring in more funding for the LAFD and hire more paramedics?
Well, one of my goddaughters, Jessica, she is Serrano. She is an MTA. It's a MT responder to the fire department. And she's not an LA Fire Department, but there's a lot of crisis going on. You got the medical card situation. They don't want, you're going to exclude them for not getting a vaccination, and you want them to report LAPD. Yeah, man, they're incredible. There's a lot of them. We need more. But you got to be careful. When you call an officer to the location, you're calling a gun. You got to make sure what you're calling for. You can't just say, we can't handle this. I don't ask, maybe I ask their opinion. Yeah, they need social workers. They need people that can do that. That's not my opinion, because I ask, what do you need to make your job better? Fire department, what do you need to make your job better? How do we deal with this situation with the homeless? That's their best thing. They're not social workers. They need to have that done by social workers.
Great.
I have actually been in the situation in our neighborhood council where we were looking to do some funding for our local 77 LAFD. A great number of the people in the council were opposed to it. So I've been in the situation, and I felt this was wrong, and I spoke up for getting that funding for our local 77 to have funds for their station. There's a certain beauty to being able to sway the room by explaining why you think something's right and something's just, and talking about the people there who are doing the job. So I would like to use what I've learned as a neighborhood council member to use this power of persuasion to not only propose funding for the LAFD, but to get it across the table and get that done. Thank you very much.
As my second job, it's the medical field. I always deal with paramedics, all the stuff. East Los Angeles College, years ago, I take EMT classes. The problem is city government spending money for them, high salaries, high benefits, but they don't give the people who in the front line. Second problem, it's educational. To pass the EMT class and get the paramedics, you're going a lot of things going, and you need to graduate. So basically, the first line people who work for you having hard time to get educated and have a hard time to get money funding for city, because city only think about for their salaries, money's for them. That's the problem. Again, it's crisis. The money, it's not management correctly. The policy making, it's not correctly. They spending right and left taxpayer. We pay taxes. That's why we end up with this on proper management, Cole.
And if you want to stay up there, this will be the last question for you guys. What do you plan to do about the rise in the thefts of catalytic converters and street lighting wire?
Yes, I was one candidate who collects 600 signature door by door in a darkness, in a Christmas time, all over in the rain. The people tell me what they want. They wanted to criminalize those people. But what do we have? Do you know? You will call police, they're not responding. I got solution. New text messaging non-violent crime to LAPD. LAPD has the computers, everything. If you see something, take a picture, send it. They will be got right away. Simple. We don't need to spending even money. Text messaging. That's the first things to do. Second, we need to put a lot of cameras. Private residents, they already have the cameras. My house connect camera to the LAPD. I'll give access. We need to get the system management properly. There are a lot of good ideas, but they don't use it because they only focus things, spending money for them. It's enough, it's enough. That's why we need to do it.
Again, I have some direct experience with this. I should say I am an unabashed fan of the LAPD. They come and report at our council every month, and I work with them on cleanups. I work with them on all kinds of local crime in the area that you don't hear about, but we get things done. Yes, there are abuses, but that's not the focus here. I recently had the captain at a meeting talking about the etching program for the catalytic converters, which is good. And I said, how about instead of just etching the VIN number, how about etching in high explosive, this will detonate in 2 minutes? He liked it too. So I'm not sure they're going to do it, but again, I want to keep working with the LAPD and come up with creative solutions for this. Thank you very much.
The crime with that is that the materials that are in the catalytic converters are being sold at a really high expensive rate. Isn't so much, it's like supply and demand. You get the people that are going to pay for it, they're going to go ahead and steal them. You got $1,000, $15,000 of a day that they're going to make just cutting out catalytic converters, or are they going to go get a job? As long as you keep not prosecuting, it's going to keep happening. Same thing with the smash and grab. You criminalize that on a major level, not let them jailhouse talk, you're just going to do the weekend in jail. They'll take a chance for a $7,000 purse, snatch as much as they want, but the moment they know they're going to do 10 years for it, now they're going to stop. Again, it comes from jailhouse politics. They talk to each other, they know what they should do, and they know what it's worth. You're willing to take the gamble, they're going to keep doing it. The police, their hands are tied with that stuff because you can't put an ID on the stuff that's inside, and it's worth a lot of money.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, this is really high. Thank you very much. I want to thank Dakota Smith. Excellent job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
I also want to thank again the Osborne Neighborhood Church for the use of their facility, which is phenomenal. Arleta Neighborhood Council for the setup. It was really spectacular. And of course, the candidates. Now, this is just the start. You need to do your homework. You've learned a little bit about the people. Go on outside to the patio and meet and greet with the candidates yourself in case your question wasn't answered. And also meet with your neighborhood council election committees out in the patio. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Thanks, that was so